Hello, everybody. We are back with Deep Images. We're still doing Halloween 2025. This will be our last Halloween 2025 project. If by some chance the post production team gets further behind again, you may see this after Halloween, but we hope you enjoy it regardless. So, we are going to do one of our patented symposiums. We did the David Lynch symposiums, we have one more entry coming up. But yeah, we did Sinners. And so, we're going to do the same thing format. We're going to talk about the movie. We're going to sketchily go through the plot points and go around or around table, discuss, when we each first saw the film, our impressions were, what our impressions are now, any analysis, any subtext, any subtext, any context. I'm Henry Covert, and I've got this wonderful guy right beneath me, CF Roberts, as my co-host. And then a little removed from him is live from Australia, Justin Cotton, my co-host. And then I've got AC Nicholas Clockwise, our wonderful new star, and a recent addition who's also a superstar, Robert Spaghetti. So, all right. I like your shirt, Robert.
Thank you.
Okay, so what we're dealing with today is a film that came out in 1974, directed by Tobe Hooper, and it's called The Texas Chain Saw Massacre. There is a pause between chain and saw in that first movie. That is canon, as you kids say now about your lore. I'm a geek too, I get it. But in the canonical lore, it's Texas Chain Saw Massacre. And this is I guess, a 83-minute film. It's very streamlined. It's very tight. I'll go ahead and get some hyperbole out of the way. I think in many ways it's the finest. I think it's the finest independent horror movie ever made, right neck on neck with Night of the Living Dead. I think it's probably the most powerful American horror movie ever made too, and it's also an avant-garde film, and it's really there are layers to it that you're still finding years later after you watch it. I found some more last night. I've seen this movie about 100 times. There's a lot going on, so we're going to get into some of it. So essentially, Hooper and his co-producer, co-screenwriter Kim Hinkle. I'm going to turn some of their saga over to AC because he always knows the details and that kind of stuff. Can you give us like the background of the movie, like how they shot it, came up with it, and you're great on that.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's a classic. What we had some folks in Texas, the great state of Texas. And what they decided to do was they were going to make a horror film because Tobe Hooper was a filmmaker and Hinkle was too. Hooper had, I think, done a porno film. And he met up with Hinkle and they decided, okay, we're going to try to put a movie together. And it's an interesting story because at the time, Texas wasn't really a hotbed of filmmaking. I mean, there have been some independent regional horror films made there, but he got together with some people that he knew and they got some money. And it's interesting that a crazy, crazy group of people gave the money because they had budgeted like $60,000, I think, for it. Of course, the movie cost a lot more than that. So this is a really inexpensive movie, even for 1974. And some of the people who invested in it would be the future president of the Texas State Bar Association, who gave them some money, and the Texas Film Commission, who hooked them up with the distributor, and then they were off. And they based their story partially on the exploits of Ed Gein. And Ed Gein was notorious as the so-called Wisconsin lampshade murderer. And his story, amazingly enough, is now popular again.
He's resurging. And,
yeah.
and you know why? They did the same thing with Zac Efron and Ted Bundy. They got an insanely impossible, handsome-looking guy,
Charlie Hunnam,
hot guy to play Ed Gein, and now it's okay to like Ed Gein. I'm not. I don't
buy it. It's on
pop
Netflix
culture
well.
icon.
Yes.
But anyway, the actual Ed Gein story, apart from the new Netflix series and the movie Deranged, which is very good, Alan Ormsby's, filmed around the same time, a little bit later, I think, than TCM, or as everybody calls it, TCM.
Not the channel, right?
No. Also, it's notorious for Robert Bloch using it for Psycho.
Yeah.
He took aspects, the taxidermy aspect of Ed Gein's life. And, Ed was an interesting character because Ed was this sort of recluse who lived in this small town in Wisconsin. And he was sort of like the town eccentric, or as they always say when somebody gets arrested for a murder, he was quiet. He kept to himself. But Ed actually had a problem, and Ed's problem was he was mentally ill, so mentally ill that he had his mother's corpse in the house, and he was killing people because eventually he was found not guilty by reason of insanity.
But we have to demythologize this stuff. So Ed Gein only murdered 2 people. I'm not saying that's great.
Right.
I'm not saying that's good. I'm just saying he's not a mass murderer. He was a grave robber. But
no, he was a grave robber, and he basically did what Tobe Hooper and Kim Hinkle wrote in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which was, as his name suggests, created lampshades out of human skin and things like that. And as I was going to say, he was one of the rare people found not guilty by reason of insanity, which is a difficult defense to raise in the United States. But it came down to the jury, I think, thought Ed believed he was killing deer or animals or something. And the definitive book on Ed Gein, I believe, was written by the judge at his trial. And some of the pictures in there are very disturbing. I read the book many years ago, and you see like a decapitated woman hanging from the rafter of his barn.
Right, he's put the hooks through her Achilles tendon.
Right.
Animal, hanging her, cut her head off, and then he cut her open from genital area to the neck. And I'm like,
right.
I guess anyway, he took her organs out. He basically treated her like a deer.
Like a deer. He gutted her like a deer. And
come on, Pressa, come on.
Clearly mentally ill, but just a horrible story from the 1950s. They decided, Henkel and Hooper, that this would make a good horror film if we could do something about it. Now, it's always interesting to me that the Texas Chainsaw Massacre kind of predates the Coen brothers, because the Coen brothers opened Fargo with a caption that said, "This is based on a true story." But Texas Chainsaw Massacre at least was based on a scintilla of an actual guy who killed people and dug bodies up and danced in the moonlight naked and all that kind of stuff. And I remember when I was in school in Minnesota. And even back in the late 70s and early 80s, the legend of Ed Gein was notorious. And it led to lots and lots of Ed Gein jokes and things like that. I think parents might have even scared their children and said, if you don't behave, we'll get Ed Gein after you. But
the head on the stick joke that we talked about recently, one of you guys attributed it to Ed Kemper, but it's famously attributed to Ed Gein, and it was attributed to him by Patrick Bateman, a fictional character. So who actually said it, AC? I
think Kemper said it. Kemper, because they reproduced that in the Netflix series Manhunter when they did the Edmund Kemper character. But anyway, one of the jokes they told when I was in school out there, and they like to tell the Ed Gein jokes, was when the police came to arrest Ed, they found him in the kitchen, and they said, "Ed, you're under arrest." And Ed said, "Ah, come on, officers, have a heart." Or the other joke, what did Ed Gein give his sweetheart for Valentine's Day? A box of Farmer's fannies. But anyhow, I digress.
Hilarity ensues.
Ed Gein in his day was kind of what Dahmer was in his day, and these other guys.
See, those are more Ed Gein jokes as opposed to like you can tell that joke with the head on the stick and everything was very much an Ed Kemper joke.
Yeah. It was a little mean spirited.
Yeah. They're two different styles of humor.
But anyway, they got together to film this movie in the incredible Texas heat that year. And if you look online, you can read the stories in there. But how many documentaries, Henry? You've seen more of the documentaries than I have.
I watched 3 this week. A Family Portrait, which is definitive to some people. I'd seen it before. I watched Dinner with Leatherface. And then I watched one called Texas Chainsaw Massacre, The Shocking Truth. which is kind of hyped as basically the shocking truth behind the story, which the stuff we're talking about right this minute, actually it's the shocking truth behind the making of the movie.
Right.
And of course, there's a couple that have appeared on the Laserdisc, Blu-rays, DVDs, all this. My copy currently does not have any extras. I opted for the totally remastered one for half the price. You know, the only way you could get it that year was if you got the Black Mariah truck with two discs inside of it, and the other disc was the extra. So, but yeah, many documentaries.
This is one of these movies that has been released to home media probably as much as Dawn of the Dead, which there's so many versions of that out there, but also Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And it has to do with, again, the financing of the film, which I'll get into a little bit here, where they made the movie, they finished the movie, and they could not get distribution for it. And apparently the guy with the Texas Film Commission hooked them up with Bryanston Pictures, Bryanston Distribution. And unbeknownst to them, and unfortunately, the gang made a deal with Satan because Bryanston was a mobbed-up, mob-backed distributor run by members of the Colombo crime family, particularly Louis Bucci Pereno. And eventually, Pereno and the other members of the Colombo family were prosecuted because Bryanston distributed Deep Throat.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
And they had many obscenity prosecutions they were fighting. But Bryanston's also noted for distributing John Carpenter's film Dark Star and The Devil's Reign, Flesh for Frankenstein, a.k.a. Andy Warhol's Frankenstein, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Good stuff from bad people.
Yeah, very good, very eclectic.
It's kind of like the Weinsteins.
Yeah, and they also did, and we were talking before the show about Ralph Bakshi, they distributed Coonskin.
Oh.
And also a film that I liked, but I think Columbia originally had, but decided to shelve and not release, which was the Earth, Wind, and Fire movie, That's the Way of the World, with Harvey Keitel. Which, have you seen it?
I haven't even heard of it till now.
That's a really
That's
good
saying
movie.
something.
I like it. It's obscure. Keitel is excellent in it, and it's particularly well written. But to get back on point here, Bryanston was only in business for, I don't know, 4 or 5 years. Not a lot of time. And then eventually the rights to the Texas Chainsaw Massacre were bought by New Line. And New Line now is a subsidiary of Warner Brothers. And it's all commercialized, and that's why how many films have we had in the Texas Chainsaw genealogy, like 8 or something.
And once you start passing the intellectual property around to the studios, I mean,
no good can come.
It has values to the producers, but me creatively, it starts to just completely loses.
No. I mean, it's nice that some money could be made, since this again was a story much like George Romero and his cohorts with Night of the Living Dead, which is they made a distribution deal with a bad company. Now, Romero's company wasn't mobbed up. Bryanston was mobbed up. And they never paid them, so they sued Bryanston, and Bryanston did the trick of all unscrupulous distributors, which was they declared bankruptcy. So even though Hooper, Henkel, and the company were owed lots of money, I think it was like the judge ruled $500,000 or something, they got like $8,100 because that's all that was left. They had to pay off the actors and the crew.
Can I ask you a question? Because I was thinking about this yesterday.
Sure, go ahead.
So essentially, Tobe Hooper, like Romero, never had any rights going forward on the movie. Is that correct? Legally?
Yeah. And
but did Hinkle have any rights, or did he just insist on being involved? Because he stayed involved with the franchise to a point.
Yeah, Hinkle was involved. And he's been around, and it's curious. I haven't thought about Kim Hinkle in a while. And a Texas filmmaker that I know, a guy by the name of John Valley, who did the Pizzagate Massacre. If you've seen that, that's on Tubi these days. Really good micro-budget horror film. Excellent. His new film's out next year. And I believe Kim Hinkle's a silent partner on that. Yeah. He has some involvement. At least that's what my friend.
They gave him a producer credit on at least the first several millennial reboots.
Yeah, and it could be that he's a Texas filmmaker, and Kim Hinkle's around. Tobe Hooper's no longer with us, but You know, the history of this movie is really spotty, the distribution. It made a lot of money, which is really sad because here's a movie that was made for, I don't know, around $250,000, some dispute, maybe a little more, maybe a little less. And it made millions and millions. I mean, I'm looking online, and
30 million.
30 million in the United
Something
States,
like that, yeah.
in North
Yeah.
America, which that's tremendous ratio
Profitable.
of gross to cost of the movie, and the production didn't see it. So it's a valuable franchise, obviously, because it's been rebooted and reimagined and brought back so many times.
The documentary, one of the ones I watched last night, they said that when it was released, even though hardly anybody wanted to admit they saw it or would see it, it was covered in all the newspapers, and it played an enormous amount of theaters across the entire country. Is that true? Or is that
It played a bunch of theaters. I wouldn't say in an enormous
the
number.
quote was, everywhere you looked, Texas Chainsaw was playing in a theater in America.
Well, I don't think that was true. What's interesting about this film, and I'm still amazed at this, if you've seen it, and I dare say most people who like horror films or even casual film buffs have seen this movie, Hooper thought he was going to get a PG rating. And he submitted it, and they got an X. And there's very little blood in this movie.
I actually counted all the blood last night.
There's very little.
There's no gore.
No gore.
Right.
Very disturbing, though. And it's one of those rare movies that got its X rating simply because it's too much.
Didn't they say that about Henry? They said they gave it an X because of its tone.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Same thing.
Though Henry's a lot grosser than.
Right.
Yeah, it's a movie that's just way too intense.
Yeah.
And even hardcore horror audiences in 1974 and 75, and it was re-released many times afterwards throughout the 70s and 80s, particularly when New Line picked it up. New Line was always putting it back out around Halloween. Horror fans weren't ready for it. Nobody was ready for it. I mean, we'd seen The Exorcist, okay, that's a big studio horror film, very intense, very disturbing, got an R rating because it's a big studio horror film directed by William Friedkin. And here we have this scrappy, low-budget shot on 16mm horror film from Texas that had all kind of ratings problems, which points out the double standard of the ratings board in the United States, which is if you're a studio guy like Steven Spielberg, we'll give you that PG, and then we'll make a special rating called PG-13 for you.
Well, it's like Warner Brothers deliberately keeping the devils from us for 50
years. Yeah, The Devils, which had its X and has never been shown.
Just put it out on Blu-ray, make it X. We don't care anymore.
Yeah.
Nobody cares about the MPAA anymore. It's a dead system.
But we were lucky in the United States because the Texas Chainsaw Massacre in the theaters that it played uncut. Many countries around the world, it was banned. It was banned outright because it was just too intense. And I'm looking at you, Justin. Australia, I believe, was one of those.
UK, right?
UK, yeah. It played for a while in
everything.
UK, and then the British Board of Film Censors, the BBFC, they changed that to British Board of Film Classification because they didn't like the connotation of censorship, banned it and said it was completely disturbing, and usually the movies that they banned at the time, they thought didn't have any significant value, which they're wrong, obviously. And years later, Texas Chainsaw Massacre was given a certificate in the UK, uncut, and it is played. And
it loosened up after Furman's era, James Furman.
Yeah. And the BBFC basically, in their apologetic rating, said, well, we've approved the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which was banned for all these years, because times have changed. But anyway,
wasn't that woman in the UK called Mary Whitehouse who was campaigning
Yes.
in the 80s for censorship? And the term video nasty, I always associate, there's a like 82, 83 comedy series called The Young Ones.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
British. And they keep referring to video nasties in that film, in that series. Yeah. So that's what it reminds me of.
And,
the Young Ones always, as they would put it, took the piss at whatever's going on in
Britain. They took the piss out of everything. But it's interesting about the video nasties for our viewers who may not be familiar with the law. that the United Kingdom passed. A lot of those films, if you look at them today, aren't that bad at all. But it was the poster art or the VHS box cover that upset the censors, like Driller Killer, Abel Ferrara's movie. That's not a particularly gory or violent horror film. Yeah, it's violent, but it's not over the top violent. But the censorship board in England at the time thought, oh my God, look at the cover. A guy with a battery operated drill with a big drill bit on it.
These people have no lives. They've never experienced real life. So to them, just the thought of the drill going in someone's head, no matter how it's presented.
And it's interesting because the only analogous situation you had in the United States was when the state of Maryland had its own censorship board. And they had a Mary, I forget what Mary's last name was, but John Waters was her arch enemy, and vice versa. And the way Waters described it in one of his books when he would submit his film to Mary in Maryland for the Maryland Film Board in Baltimore, he said they would have 3 movies running at once with the sound turned down because obviously they don't care what's on the soundtrack. And Mary would be there with her contingent and she'd be yelling stuff like Cunnilingus on projector 2 and things like that. And he said one time he had one of his films there and she made him cut a scene of it and they cut it right there. He said, I had a brand new answer print and they took scissors and just chopped the scene out and said, here's your film back, Waters. Get the hell out of here.
You think it would have just banned him altogether from living in Baltimore?
Yeah, but that would be the only instance really in the United States of, censorship to a level that you see in other countries, because Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and let me see if I can find a list of where, in fact, it was denied. It was banned in Brazil, Chile, Finland, France, Iceland, Ireland, Norway. Yep. Singapore, Sweden, and West Germany. In France, it was later rated X for, quote, incitement to violence, end quote. I find it hard to believe that movie would incite anybody to violence. In fact, man.
You can say the same about any film that's got graphic violence, I suppose,
like avoid violence.
Pulp Fiction or something,
It got released, Justin, it got released in Australia in 2021.
No, I saw on 1984 on Wikipedia, it said it got released in Australia in 1984, but I do know Australia is pretty prudish, though, so I can stand to be corrected, but they can be prudish and censorious. Yeah, I've got a theory about why that is, but it would come across as a bit anti-Australian, possibly, that theory, but never mind.
You were talking about Mary Whitehouse. I just wanted to make a couple of comments. One is, I'm finally going to post a short show on Video Nasties that I did with a gentleman named Paul Donaldson a few months ago. It's just been laying around, but he's British. He gives a good kind of primer on it. It's not very long. I also wanted to say that, for any hard rock fans watching, there is a notorious, incredible song about Mary Whitehouse called Mary Long by Deep Purple, which came out in 1973. And Ian Gillan based her, Larry Long is a composite character of Mary Whitehouse and Lord Langford. And the lyrics pretty much, they don't talk about movies, but they talk about like art, visual art, and they talk about the hypocrisy of those people and how those people were so messed up they didn't even understand sex or anything about it.
Yeah, and by the way, I did look it up. The Maryland gal was Mary Avara, who fought with the great John Waters over all of it. So it seems it's Mary is always a censor wherever you go. But
I remember all those interview clips with her.
But anyway, the legacy of the Chainsaw Massacre lives on to the point where every couple of years it's brought back from the dead and there's a reboot or a reimagining or a sequel in name or something. They even did a 3D version a couple of years ago.
It is to me, I was talking to Tim about it yesterday. We were kind of measuring. I should have made a chart. I know somebody on the internet, probably millions of people made charts, but have you ever seen the charts about how the zombie movies are related? Like all of Romero's movies? Because there's several parallel sequels to Dawn of the Dead. Return of the Living Dead, or Ted, Festival of the Dead, and then of course, there's remakes and stuff. Texas Chainsaw has more actual reboots where you begin the story from zero than Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, Halloween, or the zombie movies. I mean, that's what you're right. Every few years, and it's not just more sequels. It's wholesale. They keep trying to pump it out to somebody, desperately, so somebody will watch their fucking movies. Yeah, I watched the 3D one recently. It's a direct sequel. It's a direct sequel to the first one.
Right, to number one.
But it's problematic because it uses footage from the first one for the first few minutes, and then it gets into action that's supposedly taking immediately after. You can tell those people did not have the sensibility that Hooper did to shoot that footage, and the banality of the dialogue was ridiculous.
Well, yeah, and it's one of these things where we want to cash in on something that is a cash cow after it had really not been, because of the distribution problems. As an aside, I hosted a showing of Night of the Living Dead last week at a theater here where I live, and a lot of people don't realize that John Russo, one of the cohorts of Romero, decided, hey, since that movie was released without a copyright date on it and we lost it, it went into the public domain, I'm going to take the movie and film some new footage.
That was years later.
And that was years later.
That's horrible.
It's the worst ever. Talk about a cynical cash grab. But this is one of these movies where if you haven't seen it, you need to see it. But unfortunately, you can't get in a time machine and go back to 1974. Because this is one of these movies where you really need to see it as a product of its day and age, its time. Like when I showed Night of the Living Dead, some members of the audience afterwards were saying, wow, it was fun to see all these zombie tropes together. And I pointed out, he created them. This is 1968. They're tropes only because of George Romero. The same thing with Tobe Hooper. Their tropes and chainsaw is now part of the, not just film vernacular. Everybody talks about the Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
And the problem with a lot of younger people, and I'm not slagging them per se at any particular generation, but there's always been people like this, is that they don't look things up or research anything in context. And to them, when they start to they don't actually trace works of art back to their origins like we were taught to do. I was anyway. And they use time travel. So to them, Quentin Tarantino did influence all the people that he ripped off. And Romero was using the tropes that were already there, because that's how their brain works. They don't think logically.
An influential movie on a number of fronts, not just because it spawned all those reboots and shit, but it influenced the way horror would go. Night of the Living Dead, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, to a lesser degree, some of the Wes Craven stuff, made the modern independent horror film.
It amped it up a lot more intense and violent, and but also a lot of social commentary, which kind of flew over people's heads too.
But anyway, I don't want to monopolize the conversation here.
I'll just tell these people that are watching who haven't seen it, like 3 people.
Notice how I avoided that, Henry.
I very skillful, sir. The story's simple. It's 5 kids or whatever, young people, youths, as the narration says. John La Roquette, years before that TV show was in. Which one?
Night Court.
It was even before he was in Choose Me. But he actually narrated that, yes. And I don't know. I used to know the circumstances, but I forgot.
He got paid with a bag of weed. He's a buddy of Hooper's, so yeah.
There you go.
Well, he does it so precisely, and he pronounces all the words very precisely, which I like. Some people think it's pretentious, but no. And not only that, but several of the sequels have either deliberately trying to emulate it or satirizing it and copying it, their beginnings with a similar screed. And almost every documentary has started with a screed like that in that style. But it's unforgettable. So essentially they're locating it in, it's a real story, which a lot of people believed because of this. It's August 18, 1973. You got a date on it, boom. The thing about this movie, and I was talking to Tim about this, people talk a lot about the lore of these kind of things, which I'm very into myself, but one of the things that totally discredits almost all the Texas Chainsaw movies after the mid 90s is that they ignore the fact that the first 2 movies took place in their time, dated of their time, and have specific references to their time, even crimes real crime, a few real, many fabricated crimes in Texas. And the 80s one even more so. So I'm like, how can the Texas Chainsaw 3D take place right after? Then it jumps 20 years, so that would be 1994. But no, it's 2013. And I said, why'd they do that, Tim? He said, the producers just decided it would be better. I'm like, so you just decided, didn't do his math. He's like, 40 years, became 20 years. And it's like, unfortunately, a lot of people buy this horse shit, Yeah. And, I mean, I think anyone can enjoy these kind of raw, visceral movies, but there are intellectual layers in there. And I think, these corporate entities have no clue what the fuck is embedded in those works. So the narration, and then essentially, I'll get more into this later. Robert and I were discussing this before the show. It's a heavy movie. It's a lot of presaging, portents, signs and portents, doom, death coming, and heralded. So, you've got all these clues from the beginning that these five, average, mundane, mediocre, however vaguely hippie-ish they look kids, are going to be impacted by something beyond their reckoning, even beyond the reckoning of the perpetrators of the crimes. Probably they don't even realize how evil they are, insane. And so you see a shot of sunspot activity, and you eventually hear one of the girls famously say that Saturn's in retrograde. A lot of people say that now as a joke when things are going bad because of that movie.
Yeah, it's just that watching it back today, that was the one phrase that kind of jumped out at me that I never had before. Just Saturn is a bad influence.
Yeah, everything that girl is saying is actually true. I mean, my father collected that magazine, somewhat American Astrology. He collected Horoscope. He liked that one better, but they're very similar. They're kind of like digests, and they go through each month of what's going on with your sign and all this stuff in your love life. But they do get into the hardcore stuff, and they do get into the planets and the planetary influence, which is electromagnetic. And regardless of what anyone thinks about astrology, there is a fundamental astronomy element to it, and that kind of explore that in the sense that these people are dealing with fate. It's going to happen. They have no idea what's going to happen or what it is. And for the first herald, I guess, in the flesh is the hitchhiker. So these five kids pick up the hitchhiker, and the hitchhiker is, absolutely demented. Again, these kids are kind of wannabe hippies, so they think he's okay at first. Even though one look at him and you can tell he's going to be dangerous. But they're like, hey, dude, come on in, man. They regret it pretty quickly.
Take a ride in the mystery machine.
Yeah, it is. It reminded me, actually, it reminded me of the Scooby-Doo Mystery Machine parody that Kevin Smith did in Jay and Silent Bob that I thought was brilliant. That's what it reminded me of. I felt like the hitchhiker is basically telling you the slaughterhouse, that's the biggest connection. The family's been in meat for generations. And so he claims their grandfather worked there, and he killed the animals themselves. He doesn't like the gun. The gun doesn't do it right. Bear with the sledgehammer, And it's like, first of all, clarify for people who aren't vegetarians, there's no such thing as humane slaughter. That in and of itself is an oxymoron. So, but anyway, as you were. But this is like they were trying to do their version of humane slaughter with the nail guns or whatever. But these guys were like, no, it's got to be brutal. You got to see their brains bash in and to get the blood. They're ghoulish, like Ed Wood was. I mean, Ed Wood could be like Ed Gein was, but it's on this massive scale. Like you find out the hitchhiker is a herald of a whole family, 3 brothers, a grandfather, and then some others, a taxidermied grandmother and taxidermied dog. And they live in this house. And the bad luck that these people have, and it revolves around the Hardesties, is that their grandfather lived in that same neighborhood. So they go to check out his grave first.
Right.
And then you have
to
more.
See if it was vandalized.
Yes, grave robbing. Well, yeah, that's the thing at the beginning, this other layer, other than the signs and portents, faux news broadcasts. So I watched it last evening with the subtitles, and I actually read all of them through the whole movie as I was going. I'd never done that before. And it's some of them are real things. Most of them are made up, but it's basically telling you Texas is fucked. And this day in history, this moment in time, Texas is just seething with evil and rage and horror. It's an underlying simmering point the characters don't even notice or address, because we all have these ubiquitous radios or TVs playing in the background. And Romero did some of that in Night of the Living Dead, though he did have them start watching and keeping up with the news. So essentially it looks like a grave robber deal. and someone has wired a corpse to a monument. And I mean, the way it's shot is absolutely brilliant. The newsman talks about it. I think his name is their newsman on the site is Jesus Maldonado. And so
Jesus.
Jesus, yes, it is.
Jesus Maldonado. Yeah.
Jesus Maldonado. That's the reporter on these cases. So yeah, is it grave robbing? Like Geen was predominantly? Well, no, it's a lot more than that. And so when the hitchhiker cuts himself, they're like, why does he cut himself? You know, it's like it's all the same to this guy. It's all meat. He's meat. The camels are meat. Victims are meat. He doesn't care. He likes cutting it up. He likes pain. You know, that's they live on fear, as they say in the first sequel. That's kind of where it spirals. So basically, they go into the house the grandparents allegedly lived in after the grave thing. At the grave, there's another sign. There's another symbol. The old man on his back drinking. He's babbling these things, but basically saying, "I've seen things. You know, you won't believe," that kind of stuff. Yeah. And so there's all these warnings, but these kids are totally heedless to it, right? They go to the house, and there's like nothing to it. It's abandoned. Then they gradually get split up by their own foolishness, and kind of end up going to their neighbors, who turned out to be this heinous family now. There's no indication of whether their grandfather knew the grandfather of the Sawyers is in the movie. I don't know. Franklin does say their uncle worked in the slaughterhouse. He's bragging about it. So that's one uncle. Their other uncle is a lawman or Texas Ranger called Lefty Enright. So one of their uncles worked in meat. So Franklin, you know, when they meet the hitchhiker, Franklin, by the way, is one of the two kind of major victim characters. The other three are just kind of interchangeable. There's two dudes.
Yeah, they really are not characters much at all. They just kind of just
they're just
bodies.
Dumb kids.
What are the names? Kirk and Terry. Kirk and Terry.
Jerry.
Kirk and Jerry and
the
woman
is Pam's the other girl.
Pam.
Yeah. What's her name?
Pam and Sally.
Yeah, Pam. Okay, so Pam, you know, is slightly woke by the real definition of woke. So she's reading the astrology magazine, and they're all making fun of her, of course. The two dudes are just lugs, but Sally, who's also kind of, you know, other than what a lot of people would find very attractive at that time, there's not much to her, but she's taking care of her handicapped brother, Franklin. Franklin is the only character that has any definition, really. The only protagonist who has any definition. There's arguably some to one of the family, but not to the extent of Franklin. So, you know, you hate Franklin probably when you first see it. He's annoying. He's your friend who asks you a lot of dumb questions. I've had a lot of friends like this. You know, he embarrasses you in public. It's nothing to do with him being disabled. He just always wants to be in on something that he thinks is hip that'll make him look hip to other people because he feels so completely inadequate. And so when he meets the hitchhiker, it's like he's got a little cachet there. He's got his knife with blood on it, you know, and his uncle worked in the same slaughterhouse, you know, and he likes head cheese, you know, and it's what we call now a poser, you know, is what he was being. And so Sally, just like everything with him, just thinks it's frivolous, but that's a mistake. Again, they're not reading any of the signs about this because Franklin's like worried sick. And some of the things he says are ridiculous. Like, do you think he's mad at me? Do you think he's going to come back? And then they pick on him. Like, he's got your address and he's going to kill you, Franklin. And the thing is, you know, Franklin sounds ridiculous, but he's sounding a warning and no one's listening.
He has some valid concerns. The trouble is they're being channeled through a very annoying kind of guy who's basically the fifth wheel, and he's like, in a way, it's easy to sympathize with him because he's the fifth wheel and he knows he's the fifth wheel.
Well, he's actually the fifth and sixth wheel because he has a wheelchair.
Yeah, true. Fair. Yeah, he came with a spare, you know.
Don't worry, I use a wheelchair sometimes, so it's not a diss.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
But, you know, just on the same point, you know, at the same time, he's one of those guys who is a fifth wheel, knows he's the fifth wheel, just loudly rails about being the fifth wheel and lets everybody know it and won't let anyone forget it.
Oh.
So that's, which, you know, so when he says something where it's like, you know, this is maybe worth listening to, they're maybe less inclined to listen to it.
Right. They see him as a boy who cried wolf, but, you know, another classic trope. But,
so the smartest thing he says is when it's just Tim and Sally, and it's nighttime, and they're outside the van, and the other two have gone missing, and also Jerry's gone missing as well, hasn't come back. And he says, "I think we just need to get out of here," Whereas Sally's saying, "Give me the flashlight, give me the flashlight," because she wants to go.
The thing is, we've seen so many movies.
He was right. If they'd left, those two would have been okay.
Absolutely, and we've seen this happen in so many movies since then, maybe some before it, where the kids, go, split up or do something stupid, and it's satirized a lot nowadays. They do all the wrong things. To me, it's to an insane extent. First of all,
there's a parallel here. I mean, it's almost like a play on etiquette. Why the hell do you wander into somebody's damn house? Why do three of you separately wander into somebody's damn house?
Yeah.
I mean, it's like all the other care about is seeing stuff. There's a few memories that Sally recites that are to her important, but really are ephemeral to the entire storyline. But that's kind of where her brain is at. And that's unfortunately kind of what's leading this into this horrible mess. Is her obsession with her family's past, which isn't all that interesting. Why do they need to go to the
if they're that obsessed about getting gasoline, couldn't they just have stayed the night in the Franklin house, then gone back to the gas station the next day? Because it seems to be walking.
Yeah, because they want to keep exploring and finding stuff and being cool. And this is the kind of movie that nowadays, if it were made, it would be a found footage movie. The characters would be much more unlikable. They'd be doing everything wrong.
Think about this, guys. There's an analogy to Night of the Living Dead, where the most obnoxious, most unlikable character is actually right. Yeah. Harry, the dad, says the basement is the safe place.
Yeah.
And everybody hates Harry, and he comes to a bad end, but he was right. And Franklin, unlikable character, says, "What are we doing?" And he's whining constantly, and he's ultimately right.
I mean, the thing is, it's an abandoned house. Okay, just other than the girl who's into astrology, say these other four. Okay, other than Franklin, the other three characters, they're totally non-superstitious. They think everything's a Scooby-Doo ending probably, and they're wandering around in the fields. I mean, how do they let it get dark in an area where they've never been in their lives? Who in their right mind would fucking do that? But this is the early 70s. So you might say, well, hippies were free and there wasn't much crime. However, the ongoing narration from the news is telling you all along that Texas is infested with crime and unsolved murders. It could happen anytime. I mean, they even got their grandfather is interred in the graveyard, one of the ones that was desecrated by the Sawyer's family.
So I told you to stay out of that graveyard.
It's like, at that point alone, it's like when they say, "Oh, well, at least his grave wasn't disturbed." I think Franklin says that. And it's like, okay, great. Now let's go. Let's get the hell out of this whole village or county or whatever it is. But they linger around. They don't really do anything. I guess they have fun. I mean, they don't even smoke weed or have sex. They're like boring hippies. They're just like, we're walking around, man. We're cool.
They thought there was a swimming hole around there.
Yeah, they're probably all like,
yeah.
Oh, it's ridiculous. And
the allure of the
swimming hole.
But the way they set it up as far as, going into someone's house.
Let's play with the gar,
Yeah, because the first guy is Kirk, right? Goes in first.
Yeah.
But Kirk goes in first, and he just walks down the hallway, and he's like, "Anybody there? Is anybody there?" And the thing is, I guess in his rudimentary brain, he sees these things that are probably to him like trophies or something, like stuffed animals or that hunters have on the wall, and he probably thinks, "Oh, that's just their little trophy." So definitely somebody lives here. So he just foolishly keeps going down the hall until this leather-faced being smashes his head with a mallet, and he's not dead yet. He starts doing this jiggling thing, which very
the dance of death.
Is that what you call it?
Yeah,
I guess it's some spasm people have when
that's beautifully done too, because that's where all the horror comes from for a lot of audiences, is just the way he's thrashing around and whatnot after he gets hit.
Right, you see that after.
It's
just they come away with this thought that it's a very gory movie. It's really not, but it's stuff like that makes a lot of people's memories function in a way where it's like, it's stuff like that
it makes you think
that gives that illusion.
Right, you've seen more than you have.
You thought it was gory when you just finished watching it, but when you think about it, actually there was no blood.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a jump shock. It's a jump scare with a sledgehammer.
The same the proof in the pudding about the movie being gory or not is when Pam goes into the house. Now she is a little bit afraid because she is superstitious, and there's an incredible shot. And of course, sometimes if you bring it up, you think I'm saying the actress who plays Pam has a great body. I'm not saying that at all. When she gets off the seesaw and you're looking at her worm's eye and she starts going to the house, the camera work is fucking amazing the way it affects her, and it just like gives you this feeling she's going into this just vortex of unknown terror. And so she's there, and she falls into a room, and the room is filled with awful, just filth, like that is accumulated, like mold, and there's feathers from animals and all kinds of fur and all kinds of other stuff. They don't show any feces, but it's probably
skeletons.
there.
Yeah. Bones and skulls.
Yeah, well, that's the main thing is that she's on the floor in this awful, and then she looks up, and each time she looks, she sees closer and closer to human skeletons. At first, she sees animal skeletons, then she sees human and animal skeletons juxtaposed. Then she sees the bed. So the bed is an entire tableau made around, like the headboard down to the feet of the bed are at least decorated by human bones, the skulls at the head of the bed. So
the thing that disturbed me even more so than the bones was in that house there's a cage with a chicken in it. The cage is way too small.
And it bothered her too.
Bird cage for like a canary or something.
Yeah, every detail is
chicken.
So disturbing.
Well, remember when they're talking about the slaughterhouse, Pam is the one who is a vegetarian, not just an astrologer. Right. So when she sees the chicken in the cage, that's an immediate trigger for her. Something's wrong. Which, now we know if you do shit like that, you might eventually put people in cages, maybe. But, she doesn't really have time to act on much of this before Leatherface gets her. And I think the first scene, the shot, action, activity that made me wince is when he takes her into the room where he's already got the body of Kirk, but you don't see the whole body. Like you see his arms and you see his lower torso and his legs. Something is obstructing this part, and you don't see his head, and that's for a reason. And so,
Hooper's trying to get a PG rating.
I mean, he takes her and he puts her on a meat hook, and it doesn't show it piercing her back, but the way it's done, the way it's shot, her reaction, the thought, like how would that feel, and she's trying to get it. She's trying to get higher, like the noose, so she can get more grip on it, so she can get off of it. Totally realistic. And then Leatherface takes out the chainsaw, and then you see the chainsaw. He starts using it, and you don't really see what he does, but based on the angles and her reaction at first, I think Leatherface cuts Kirk's head off first.
Yeah,
he's in that area where his head would be.
Right.
And then I guess he's just
Kirk. Yeah,
he's just eviscerating him. He's not cutting any limbs off. And then later, our buddy Jerry comes in, and of course, I think he's like the Fred of the Scooby-Doo gang, and he thinks he's really suave. And he's like, I'm going to get to the bottom of this mystery, man. And he goes in there down the hallway, and he's total moron. He's like, by this time it's starting to get dark. And it's like, why would you let them stay in there for like a half hour? And then he goes in there, and Leatherface gets him too, right? But how does he get him? Does he hit him?
With a hammer. Big hammer comes out.
He hits him with a hammer too. Yeah. But when they go into but it's after he discovers Pam.
Yeah.
He's jerking on this. Yeah. It's like a refrigerator on the freezer on the floor.
Freezer.
And he keeps trying to open it. I don't know why. I guess maybe he hears tapping in it or something in it.
Yeah.
And opens up. She pops out like spasmodically. So she's not dead, but she's again, I probably had her head bashed in. And it again is chillingly kind of realistic the way her movements are, and it's really scary. Her expression, and she's starting to go pale like she is dying. And it's just an incredible graphic, and it's just heavy mascara. All the graphics are great. And when they get into the makeup and eyes and the way he frames them. So then Leatherface, just like this, he swaps her back in. Like she weighs nothing. And then they get Jerry. So, but we really don't see the ultimate fate of these three hapless youths.
No.
And that room is what people think is gory. But there is no flesh, nerves.
Nothing exposed.
Right.
No.
It's all that all's turned into head cheese and hitchhikers eating it. So, they Flint's he thought of everything. This movie thought of everything. So anyway, so that's kind of where it is up to a point. And anybody would like to go into the latter part is cool. All I'll say is this: what really hit me is I timed it last night. I'm sure I have in the past, but it's been years. And so at the 52-minute mark, if you can't handle this stuff, don't watch it anymore. Because from the 52-minute mark until the 1 hour 23-minute mark, it's 30 solid minutes of a person screaming and running for dear life at pitch intensity. Nothing slows down. There's a couple of tiny little seconds where she thinks she might be safe, and then it just keeps escalating. So you kind of
jumps through 2 windows.
Yeah,
I counted those.
In hell. Windows in
hell.
the
second floor window.
Yeah.
First floor and second floor.
And it starts with the only murder that has blood is Franklin, and that's only like the drops of blood come out. Basically Leatherface pops out on them. They're arguing over who's going to have the flashlight, and another classic argument. Sally's like, "No, and I'll go without it." I'm like, "Well, you could have gone when it was light, Sally." And so Franklin's got the flashlight, and that's when he hears, I hear something, and then and Leatherface just completely eviscerates him. But again, you only see some drops of blood flying.
You don't see much because it's at night, right? So
and his wheelchair's turned to us.
Yeah.
So you never see him poke a chainsaw through anybody like you see in all the later chainsaw movies. The times of blood in the movie, the hitchhiker cuts his palm. He cuts Franklin's arm here. The Franklin death. I think there's 1 or 2 other like short blood or pain-free blood things, and that's it. There's no like dripping blood out of corpses and shit. They saved all that for part 2, and there's a lot of it in part 2. Hello, hope you enjoyed part 1 of our Texas Chainsaw Massacre Symposium. Before we leave you with the closing credits and the amazing music of Tanya Atomic, we're going to treat you to a 5-minute video essay by Tim Tolbert, who is going to discuss the various iterations of Texas Chainsaw Massacre on film over the years and kind of discuss how they fit together or what it all means, and a good bit of meta thinking here. So hope you enjoy this, and part 2 is coming soon. Thank you.
They treat the original like it's the true story. And then all of the sequels are almost like TV movies of the real story. Think of like how obsessed we are with true crime. And you'll have, 15 different TV movies, miniseries, direct-to-video movies on killers like BTK or Jeffrey Dahmer, That's kind of the way that the Texas Chainsaw Massacre movies operate. And one of the reasons I think you can play fast and loose with the continuity, because they're all like dramatic reenactments. That dramatic reenactment is something that I really apply to the 2003 remake for its slickness, the way that the actors look. It's kind of Lifetime movie-ish in a way. And I don't mean that as a detractor. I think that's kind of what they were going for with it. The first 2 are kind of the prime universe versions. They are in my opinion, they're the real life versions, and everything else is kind of the impact that it left on people. That they're almost like they're in-universe movies about the original incidents, and how the original incidents, there's a finality in part 2, but there's also a kind of unresolved element. I mean, you see, the first one kind of has no beginning and it kind of has no ending. Of course, that's what they say at the beginning of part 2. And I think it's the same thing in our culture. Just because a terrible tragedy, a terrible act of violence ends, doesn't necessarily mean that it's over with. It keeps perpetuating. And what the family subscribes to in the original movie, that's what everybody's doing now. We're all kind of collectively crazy. We're all under the hot sun fighting for our, piece of meat, so to speak, to survive and to be prosperous. And of course, some of those are downplayed in sequels. Like the remake really, really downplays the family. Even Leatherface to an extent. The Netflix one doesn't even really have the family in it, but the themes are all still there. And I think that if you look hard enough, you can definitely see there's more to meets the eye with that entire franchise. And it's one of the reasons why I love it so much.
And it's true that we cannot see that far behind. If we looked all the way in the past, we'd go blind. In the night, from the stars as they've all lived their lives, and the light that they gave as they burned and then died.